أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, O you who believe, have taqwa in Allah and fear Him as he should be feared, and die not except in a state of Islam. Now today, inshallah, with the topic of this khutbah, we're going to be briefly going over one of the most beloved prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that being Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, and a bit of the lessons we could take from his story and how we could use that in our daily lives. Now, before the time of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, a bit preceding that time, there were a group of pious people, very pious people, and they would do a lot of good deeds, and they were well known in their community as being good people who would do good to others, and they had a very high status in that sense, and they were very good people, and they had great character. Now, when these people they passed away, Shaitan told the people of this group of pious people, he essentially told them and guided them to start to build statues of these people and to build idols of them. And not in a an evil way, because the Shaitan, he's very sneaky in the way that he works. He basically guided them to do this in the sense that when you see these statues, when you look at them, you'll remember these good people, and that you will start doing good just like them. So he's trying to spin it in a way that it looks good to them, to these people, so that they could build these statues and build these idols of these pious people, so that when they see them, they could start doing good deeds for themselves. It seems innocent. And the Shaitan, he's very sneaky, and he's very patient when he tries to misguide us. So these people, it started off innocent. The first generation that did this, they did this, and at first it was just they had the statues, and they tried to do good things like those pious people before them. And then the generations later, Shaitan misguided them even more. He started saying that your forefathers, they were the people that they used to worship these idols, because these were people that were such good people, they were almost worthy of worship in a sense. You wanted to be like them. So then these next generations, they started to actually worship these idols. And obviously this is kind of the beginning of actual shirk taking place, of actual association of partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so these generations, there's a constant, many generations that continue to do this. And then now this is in between Prophet Idris alayhi salam and Nuh alayhi salam. So now we see the advent of Prophet Nuh. So when Nuh sees this, obviously he's guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to correct the actions of these people, to guide them, to tell them that obviously what they're doing is wrong, it's shirk, and they're associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Nuh is continuing to guide these people. And he doesn't guide them for a few years, a few decades. he guides them for centuries. Literally, for over the course of 950 years, Noah is continuing to try and guide these people. And imagine, to when we can't really fathom that number. We can't even, sometimes we get impatient waiting in line for our food. Imagine Nuh alayhi salam. He's preaching for centuries, literally centuries. Like we can't even, comprehend how long of a time that is. And Nuh, obviously being one of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's strong in his character, and he was strong enough and able to do this difficult task. And throughout these centuries, Nuh, he's gaining essentially no followers, no traction, no nothing. He's not getting any results, as you would say. So regardless of this, this did not discourage Nuh. He didn't, just stop after the first couple of years and say no one's following. Khalas, it's not working. It's never gonna work. No, Nuh knew that he had a purpose from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to spread the message of Islam. And as he started to do this, Nuh was essentially the only Muslim at this time. And the people who were around him, they would mock him, they would call him a madman, they would call him crazy, and even try to harm him. And then later on, Nuh, then he started to amass a few followers, very few. And these few followers, they were not, your elites, your wealthy people, the people with power and influence. They were not these people at all. These were the very lower classes of society, the poor people, the needy, the farmers, not your average, not the, you could say, the highest status people in that society. But regardless, Nuh, he made it a point to stick with these people, and these people became his followers. And they were very few in number. Now, later on, these wealthy people, the upper status people of society, they started to say, Nuh, okay, maybe we'll think about it if you forget about these inferior people. They thought these people that were below them in class and society, they thought they were less than. They didn't have the same wealth or status. They didn't want to be like them. So they said, okay, maybe we'll think about what you're telling us. As long as you, kind of forget about these people, we don't want to be associated with them because they're inferior to us. And Nuh alayhi salam, he obviously he rejects this, and he's not, the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not for someone who's wealthy or has power, or it's the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for all of mankind, regardless of your status in society. So later on, obviously, since Nuh refused, the people started to actually threaten Nuh. They would say that, the more you continue to do this and try and build your following, then we will stone you. They began to throw many threats at Nuh alayhi salam. And this didn't dissuade him from, continuing the message until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأُوحِيَ إِلَى نُوحٍ إِنْ أَنَّهُ لَن يُؤْمِنْ مِنْ قَوْمِكَ إِلَّا مَنْ قَدْ آمَنَ. Basically, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is that of your people, he's saying that the people that have already followed you, those are the only people that will be believing. Basically, whoever is left, they will not be guided, they will not believe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Nuh that the followers you have right now, those are going to be, the ones you have left. Don't rely on any new followers. These people, essentially, in a sense, they are a lost cause. They're just not going to be guided, and they will never accept the message of Islam. And now, when Nuh he receives this revelation, Nuh he essentially makes a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking him to not allow a single disbeliever or mushrik, someone who associates partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not let a single one of them left on earth. And the reason was because he said that if this was the case, then their generations they would continue to follow these practices of shirk, and there wouldn't be any people on earth to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there would just be corruption spreading across the earth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he accepts this dua, and he orders Nuh to build an ark, or a large ship. And this is a very, very large ship. And he didn't tell him to build it by a shore. Logically, you might think you'd build a boat by a shore where there's water, where you're expected to use it. But he tells Nuh to build it on a mountain. And when he starts doing this, the people that were mocking him before, they start mocking him even more. They realize they see him doing this. They're like, "What are you doing? So now you're a carpenter now? You're making a boat and you're making it on a mountain? Like, well, what's wrong with you?" They're continuing their claims of him being a madman, of him being crazy. So they continue to mock him and threaten him. And as this, Nuh, he tells his people, he gathers his friends, the believers that followed him, and his family, except one. Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send a flood later. But before this, he would tell them to get on the ship, as well as a pair of each animal. So he gathered a pair of each animal, and the few believers he had and his family, except one of his family members who was one of his sons. This son, he essentially rejected Nuh's command. He said, "No, I'm not going to go on this ship. I'm going to go on the highest mountain, so that when the flood comes, I'm not gonna, I'll be safe. It won't get to me. The water won't get to me." And Nuh, he pleads with him, but his son refuses to listen. So they make it onto the ship, and the flood comes, and obviously, the flood destroys everything in its path, aside from the people who were on the ark. And Nuh alayhi salam, obviously, it's your own son, it's your own relative, and he was sad about this, and he asked, Ya Allah, like he's my family, if only I could save him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he responded to him was that he's not really your family due to the fact that he is of the disbelievers. He is not, we gave you your son, but the people that are actually valuable to you are the ones that followed you, the ones who actually believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His son chose to disobey him, and he chose to do what he wished, to do what he wished, and obviously that resulted in his death. So the only people that were saved were Nuh alayhi salam, the family members that went with him, and the few believers that were with them on the ark. Now after this, the flood passes, and the ship itself actually lands on a mountain in present day Turkey. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ تَرَكْنَاهَا آيَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he left the ship of Nuh alayhi salam, and even today scientists are finding like remnants of it. He left it as an ayah, as a sign to mankind, to show that what happens to people who don't, to show that what happens to the people who associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who disbelieve in Allah. Basically, to constantly remind them. This is, essentially thousands of years ago now. And inshallah, after the break, we'll be discussing a few of the lessons we could learn from this. وَقُولِ قَوْلِ هَذَا وَاسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهِ وَلَكُمْ. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem. Amma ba'd. So there are two main lessons that I'd like us all to take from this story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. And the first of which would be, one is to not let your lack of results discourage you from continuing to do good. Now, what I mean by this is, let's say, obviously, we're not prophets, right? We're not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't guide us to, well, obviously, we're Muslims, we still have to guide others to Islam, but we are not prophets, we don't have that same burden. However, we are still Muslims, and we still have the obligation to do good and obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, sometimes, as things in life occur, you might have certain obstacles, and these obstacles, they might discourage you from continuing to do that good. For example, you might be going to a halaqah every weekend, or every week, or whatever it might be that you're doing. You might be praying, you might be doing your best to help out in the community, but you're not seeing results. You're not seeing, new people coming to the halaqah, new friends coming in. Maybe you're not really well acquainted with the people that come to the masjid. Like, oh, these guys aren't my friends. Like, I miss my friend. I could be hanging out with, my friends at this party while my dad's telling me to come to the masjid. Don't let this discourage you when you see these, lack of results in a sense, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he judges us based on our effort. Regardless of how we judge each other, you'll find in this world, we judge each other based on results, right? You could study so hard on an exam. You could study hours, days, weeks, whatever it is that you may do. And let's say you fail the exam, the person giving you the exam, there's like, sorry, but you failed. Like, what can I do for you? It's not, no matter all the effort you put into it, they don't look at that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the difference is that he looks at your effort. Even though Nuh alayhi salam, for literally centuries, if you were, to think of it, statistically, he's not, if you see his growth, it's terrible results wise. Like, if you're preaching for that many centuries and you don't have, many followers up until the very end, and they're very few in number, you think, this is a complete failure. But obviously, we know Nuh alayhi salam, he's one of the beloved prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he has such a high status in his eyes. So what this tells us is that when we're doing something good, when we're doing something for the sake of Allah, and even though we might not be praised for it, we might not be thanked for it, whether I'm cleaning the masjid or obeying my parents, you might not receive that appreciation or praise, but know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly rewarding you for it, and will continue to do so. So don't let it discourage you when you might see that things aren't, turning out the way you wanted them to. As long as you continue and strive to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be rewarded. And you most likely, almost always, you will eventually have some sort of reward in this life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it goes both ways. And the second lesson is that lineage is not, it's not something that determines your piety or your status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what I mean by this is that the person you know or the person you're related to, that's not what decides how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala views you. As we seen in the story of Nuh alayhi salam, his own son, even though, he's his direct, he's directly related to him. However, his son was a disbeliever and blatantly disobeyed Nuh alayhi salam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And however, when you look at the flip side, you've had, for example, Fir'aun. This is a side point, but an example of Fir'aun. He was one of the worst people in history. One of the worst, he claimed he was God himself. But his wife is one of the best women in history in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She was a believer, and even though she was in a sense related to him, she didn't, that didn't take away from her status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah didn't just see her and be like, oh, she's the wife of the Fir'aun, she's horrible. And he didn't see Nuh's son. He said, oh, he's Nuh's son, so it's all right, we'll give him a pass. That's not how it works when it comes to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't matter if I'm the sheikh's son, if I know this scholar, if I'm this person's brother. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at any of that. He looks at the deeds that you do and your piety and how you hold yourself as a Muslim, how your character is, not regardless of who you're related to. And this is kind of similar to a hadith mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. He says, إن الله لا ينظر إلى صوركم وأموالكم ولكن ينظر إلى قلوبكم وأعمالكم. Basically, what he's saying is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does not look to your image, like your look, your money, your wealth. He does not look to these things, but rather He looks to your heart and your actions. So what we see in this hadith is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't look to, who's the highest status people? Okay, this person, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, they're the high status people because they have all the money, they have all this. And this poor person, he doesn't have, he's nothing. That's not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at us. In fact, the people of Nuh, the few followers who followed him, the poor people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala viewed them, they were superior to the wealthy people who thought they were, because remember we said the wealthy people, they thought they were superior to the inferior poor people and lower class of society. But in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala held those poor people above them. And that's obviously what we should look for. That's our main goal, right? To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're not saying, like we said, we're not saying having wealth or status or influence is a bad thing, but it's obviously how you use it. But an important thing to take away is that us as Muslims, we have to worry about pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the number one being that we should be pleasing. Obviously, you could please your friends, your family, as long as it doesn't cross over to a point where you're transgressing against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you're disobeying Him, then you're fine. You're on the straight path, and you're on the path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to. And with that, I ask Allah to make us of those who are steadfast and firm in our iman. I ask Allah to make us of those who struggle and strive for your sake. Allahumma aghfir lana warhamna wa'afina wa'afu anna وتجاوز عن سيئاتنا. اللهم إنا نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من عذاب القبر. اللهم إنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم لا تجعلنا من الخاسرين. اللهم لا تجعلنا من الخاسرين. اللهم اجعلنا من المحسنين ومن المتقين ومن الشاكرين ومن عبادك الصالحين. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل أعوذ برب الفلق، من شر ما خلق، ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب، ومن شر النفاثات في العقد، ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.